I just want to go over racing at QCYC and give everybody an idea of what's going on, as well as some ideas if you're a new skipper or new crew, just how to get into it and how to set yourself up to have a great season. So let's start. I think the first thing sailing and sailboat racing is it's not Formula One. It can be at some levels, but if any given night anywhere around the world, there are probably thousands of people out racing sailboats. Ours is Wednesday nights. I know other clubs in the area have Wednesday night racing. RCYC is Tuesday and Thursday night. Sailing and racing sailboats, it's really something that everybody can go out at a variety of different levels and enjoy without, getting too concerned and overwhelmed by all aspects or any aspects of it. So to start off, for those people who are getting involved and getting signed up to QCYC and actually to any of the racing in the Toronto area, some of this is applicable. But the first thing that you want to do, and what we'll cover off tonight, is some of the paperwork. Two important pieces of paper that are available on the website is the notice of race. And that is available now. I'll go into a bit of detail on the difference between the notice of race and sailing instructions. But notice of race is basically an overview of a regatta, a race, or a series. It is definitely something you want to download now. It's on our website. I've done a snapshot here in the corner of the sailing section of QCYC. You'll see what we're pertaining to tonight begins at racing programs and includes elements of Wednesday night racing, open regatta, women's open, race results. So I would encourage you to go on there and explore a bit, take some time. There's lots of great information there. The sailing instructions are sort of instead of where notice of race is sort of 30,000 feet, this goes down to 2,000 feet. It's much more detailed and specific. And those do come out closer to race date. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is in a second. Another important thing, and we'll go over this next, is to get your PERF low certificate. PERF is a rating system we use. Even I know that we have sharks out there, which are a one design, but with the number of boats we have, we race with a handicap rating system, and the one we use is PERF, Performance Handicap Racing. You should have a copy of your certificate, and you need to keep it on board. They are not available now because we're just sorting out who is interested and who is not racing, but they will be available soon. You also have to register online for the events. And again, if you go into the section and enroll in racing programs and Wednesday night racing, we will walk you through that. Graham Dougal, who's on this call, did a great video to help new racers register their boats. So I would encourage you to look at that. It is also on the QCYC website channel. You should have a copy of your insurance certificate on board. Of course, we don't want any incidents, but it is important that you always keep that, actually, whether you're racing or not. So the PERF certificate, I'm going to go through this. I did not do this other years, but I think this is something we get a lot of questions about. And that is, how do I get my rating? How do I get the handicap? If you go on to PERF Low, Google that, this page will come up under searches and queries. Look for certificate inquiry. And you won't have a certificate number probably, but you do have the owner last name, the boat name, or the sail number, and it will pull up any boats that fall under that. You can then select your boat. One important thing I would say is that if a boat has changed hands, and I know we have a couple of boats in the club that's happened this year, if you go in there at this point, the boat will still be under the previous owner. So it's important that you, first of all, look under the boat name, get the certificate, and you must contact our handicapper. It's Brandon Zagowski, and you can reach him at measure@qcyc.ca. He will assist you with change of ownership. If your boat is new to the area, you may not have a certificate, so he can assist with that. And if you bought a new sail, for example, he can assist with that. Once you have found your certificate, this is an example. Actually, this is our boat, Bandolier. You can see it down the right-hand side. There are various measurements that go into the PERF formula. And at the end, it spits out this number. In this instance, sorry, the circle's in the wrong place. It's 169. So that is the number that you will enter in when you register for Wednesday night racing. So just a very quick overview between the difference between notice of race and sailing instructions. And I've done these as a comparative in many ways. So for example, the notice of race will have the dates of the races, but the sailing instructions will drill down to actual start times and time limits. Notice of race will talk about eligibility, but if you look at the sailing instructions, you'll actually see classes or divisions, which are groupings of similar boats. A notice of race talks about the venue. So we will say in Toronto Harbor, but when you actually drill down into the sailing instructions, you'll see courses with diagrams. So it just generally, these are two very differences. It's very important that you look at and pay attention to both documents and get a clear understanding of what's in them. There are lots of experienced sailors in Queen City who are more than willing to assist with anyone who has any questions. So I want to talk a little bit about crewing. I mean, a lot of this now, I'm moving into an area that's somewhat subjective. It's based on my experience and what I would encourage people to do who are crewing or who are skippers. To me, the skipper is part of the crew. So I think it's important that as a racer, whatever level you're at, that you consider these things. I think it's important, of course, that everybody contribute, and whether that's snacks or drinks, post-race beer, whatever, energy, knowledge. I think that's, of course, very important. As crew, you should not depend on your skipper to have read all the details of notice of race, sailing instructions, or rules. You can contribute significantly to the success of the boat by being aware and well read on these things. I think all of the members of crew should have a good idea about the weather and what's going to happen. Be straightforward about what you can and can't do. We've all been there where somebody suggests that they are able to do something that they can't, and vice versa. So I think it's important to be straightforward. I think it's really critical, and I've had people on my boat where the camera comes out or the discussion spirals into, last night's hockey game. That something got missed there, but concentrate on the race. Even sitting on the rail, you can be a huge asset to the skipper by, for example, looking for other boats, looking at what wind shifts, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But you really can be the skipper's extra set of eyes if you're paying attention. There are skippers who will want to go out to practice, and if you're not a boat owner, it's certainly a great time to get out. It's a lot of fun if you're a skipper to teach people, and vice versa. And I think help with the boat, that's always appreciated by boat owners. Largely, again, this falls on the skipper, but I think that it's really important that all members of the crew contribute to these elements, to make sure that all the necessary safety gear is there and easily accessible. As I mentioned, the notice of race and sailing instructions should be on board. The sailing instructions become particularly important when you actually go out to race, and we'll talk a little bit about that why, but it's the most frequently asked question is, when do I start? And we'll talk a little bit about that. The first one's probably, when do I start? And the second one is, where do I go? So we will go through those, but the sailing instructions contain that information. As mentioned, you should have your PERF certificate and insurance. We may be requiring class flags for the backstays. That will be in the sailing instructions. So be aware of that. Before every race, I think it's important, even before leaving the dock, to sort and prepare the gear. Make sure the winch handles are out, that they're accessible, the sheets are clear the cockpit and decks so that, again, there's no trip hazards, because often many of our boats spend the weekend cruising or weeknights cruising. So it's important to get things cleared up and stored so that there aren't any falls or injuries, etc. And this goes for down below as well. Store gear below securely so that suddenly, and I've been on boats where, the dishes start flying around. For those of you who are skippers and you're considering racing and getting into racing, it's a wonderful thing to do, and we really hope you come out. But you may want to, depending on your level of experience, whether you're a cruiser of many years who wants to race, or if you're new to the whole thing, certainly it's worthwhile to go out on another boat for a race or two. That may be a Wednesday night race, but it may be a race at another club or on the weekend. In selecting crew, over the years, I've gone through maybe more than I should have. But for me, experience is important, but it's certainly not everything. To me, character is key. So it's important as a skipper, and I think that most skippers will agree that bringing on somebody on board who's keen to learn, who's enthusiastic, who's interesting, who's interested, it's very important. And I think that's so. I would really encourage people to consider that when they venture out on as a crew member. And I think ultimately the chemistry in a crew is big. It's a big an important part of it, that you enjoy each other's company. We're not going for the America's Cup. We are out there to have fun. So, and at least enjoy the evening. Inevitably, the reality is that we are amateurs on weeknight racing. So new skippers, I would encourage you to build actually a pool of potential crew members to draw on, because it will happen where somebody cannot race because of something that's come up with a family or with work. So again, I always try to have a core crew and a number of people that I can draw on to fill in. If you are a crewing for a skipper, I would encourage you to let them know if there's a night when you can't go, rather than leave it to the last minute, because it really can put a boat in a bit of a bind in terms of getting out and sailing properly. If you can give a couple of days notice, it allows the skipper then to contact other members of the pool, or maybe even if he or she has to go outside the pool to find people. One thing I've always found very helpful is to find at least one member with experience. There are a lot of people in the club. Not all of them are racing still, but you will find people, non-members of the club, who are interested in sailing again, and they may have raced dinghies as a kid, whatever, and they're interested in getting back. So I would encourage you to look around and try to find one crew member with some experience. And as crazy as this sounds, skipper or crew, let your boss know that Wednesday night is race night, because it can really, if they know that and respect that, that's good. But it prevents the situation of last minute, I can't come, which can be extremely frustrating, not only for the skipper, but also for for other members on the boat. And here my tactic in terms of organizing crew is to assign tasks and to try to stay with them through at least a series. There are boats where I know where they switch around. So the person who's on the main moves to grinding the genoa, and from trimming the genoa to the helm, and from the helm to the bow. I've always found that the best tactic, and again, it's subjective, but I'm sharing my experience, has been to assign people and that they take on a position, that they become good at it, especially if they're new, and take one position and stick with it for at least 6 races. You'll see, if you look up at this number, it totals 6 people, which is a fair number, but we have a 30-foot boat, and I often race with 6. If we're short, then it is possible for example, the person who's running the main to act as tactician. Often it's possible that if there are 2 people on the genoa, one of them can go forward for a downwind leg to do the bow or the pole. So it's not necessarily that you have, say, 6 people, or 5 or 4 people can overlap. So take that into consideration. As I mentioned, as you join a boat and you start to show up, I think it's important that you contribute and show up at the boat with whatever, a 6-pack or a bag of chips or something. It goes a long way to keeping everyone happy. The reality is that given our start times, and you'll see them in the sailing instructions, it really is important to take the 5:15 tender. Our races the first gun is shortly after 6. So much later than that, and it really isn't possible to get the boats off the dock and out into the harbor and ready for racing if you leave after 5:30, 20, 22, 6, or even 5:45, depending on your division. So with respect to I'm not going to dive too deep into the racing rules of sailing. I'm no expert on it, but I do want to cover some of the important and unwritten rules that are out there, especially for new skippers. To me, rule number 000 is no shouting. I've been on boats and you just want to get off. It can be a little hectic out there, especially if you're just starting or if it's getting windy. But shouting at crew doesn't help. And there will be times when you really do need to shout, when there is something going on that requires attention. So rule number 001 in my books is no shouting. Rule 01 and 02 came from my friend Mark McCrae, who has really successful. He's been very successful racing panache in, which is a Niagara 36 in Amen and open regattas as well as at the club. And he began racing, I think it would be about 12 or 13 years ago. Not a lot of experience, grew up sailing with his grandfather in Miramichi, but he had two rules. It was basically, he went out there and he said, I don't even want to come close to hitting another boat, and don't let any crew get hurt. So to quote him, he said, we didn't force anything with any other boats and just got around the course. And if you are starting out sailing and start racing, and I hope a lot of boats do, we all hope you do, it's a great way to start, is to basically get out with the fleet and follow the fleet around. And there's nothing wrong with that. 03, discretion's the better part of valor. I remember I'd raced for years, mostly as crew. And when I first started racing at QCYC after spending a couple of years cruising in Georgian Bay, came down, got back into racing. I remember deciding we're just not going out tonight. It was really blowing. Our crew was fairly new. I hadn't been racing for several years. So just said, you know what? We'll just stay at the dock. And it turned out to be actually a good decision, because that night there were a few incidences and some damage to boats just through the weather, but it's certainly nothing wrong, especially when you're starting. And believe me, you will see that there are times when even the most experienced racers DNF, did not finish. They just decide it's not the right place to be. Again, I'm not going to go into the rules. They're not overly onerous, but there are some important ones that I think that if you're new to racing, you should certainly know. If you look at the rule book, it's quite hefty, but only rules 10 to 22 are really relevant to racers. A lot of them are on the water. A lot of them are written with respect to registrations and sportsmanship and courses and etc. But what's really important if you're new to racing is the part 2, rules 10 to 22. And they deal with things like starboard over port, luffing rights, windward versus leeward. The right-of-ways are within 3 boat lengths of the mark. Keep clear boat versus right-of-way boat, clear ahead, clear astern, obstructions, and penalty turns. Obstructions, often we're racing out in the lake, but when we're in the harbor, obstructions are a reality. So I think it's important, and I would suggest that any of you who may be coming from other clubs where they've been racing further out on the lake, obstructions in Toronto Harbor are a reality. There are 2 sources of information. Probably the best book available is The Rules in Practice. It's fairly expensive, but it's a great book, and it has a lot of illustrations to help you understand the rules. It's available at the Nautical Mind. I encourage you to go to Nautical Mind. They are a big sponsor of ours for our regatta, and they also have a good inventory of all kinds of racing books. So I would, if you're going to buy a book and want to read it that way, that's certainly important. There's a lot of online information in terms of the racing rules of sailing. There is one on the Cruising Yacht Club of Australia that is broken down by rules. It's a little bit hard to find, because I think they've sort of parked it off in a corner, but they break down each rule and explain it. So those are just 2 of many sources where you can gain an understanding of the racing rules. You will see that we in Queen City, and I'm going whether you're a new racer or seasoned veteran who's coming to the club, we have a permit with Ports Toronto, or that used to be the Toronto Harbor Commission. So we designate an area where we will be doing our racing. Now, this is what we applied for, and we see permission in which to race when in the harbor. It's approximately this area. We do try to keep to the East End just because of proximity to the club, as well as staying out of the way of ferries. But I will show you a couple of at least one course where we had to expand this boundary through the COVID days. I think also one important thing, we have ferries, and we strongly encourage you not to tussle with them. So give them right of way. So what you'll see out there on the course, first thing, there are no bank corners on a sailboat course, unlike Formula One. So we lay out the course using marks, and there are 2 distinct marks you will see. The first one is the yellow tetrahedron. You can see it in the back of the Freddie M, our committee boat. I didn't have a picture of it on the water, but I believe it's about a meter or so tall. That designates one end of the start line, and we'll talk about that. And then we have course marks, which are these orange cylinders. They're inflated and they're anchored out, and they are the layout for the course. So beware of those. As you leave the harbor as crew, your skipper has to pay attention to, of course, navigating out the channel. They have to be attentive to ferries and now an awful lot of water taxis. So as you head out on the race course, this is something that you can assist the skipper with. Identify where's the Freddie M and the start pin, and also where are the orange marks. So right away, right off the bat, our crew starts looking as soon as we leave the harbor. In terms of understanding what the course is, this is important. This is standard practice. So some of you may be aware that using course boards mounted onto either the stern or onto the starboard or port side of a community boat is standard practice. I'm just going to run through ours. So you will see this in the sailing instructions. Our course board has 5 numbers on it. C designates the course number, which is also dictates the layout of the course. N dictates the number of times around that the race officer is planning for, but you have to pay attention. We'll get that later. And the 3 M's will dictate the direction of the course. So in this instance, it's course number 9. The race officer has indicated there are 4 laps around the course, and the first mark is at 275 degrees. So immediately, anybody here experienced can tell you that the wind's approximately coming out of the west, 5 degrees to the right of west at 275, and that's where the first upwind mark will be, which would be 1A. So again, you'll see these diagrams. In this instance, this is course number 9. It is a very common course we use, windward leeward. So it is basically going upwind, rounding mark 1, a clearing mark for 1A, and then back to 2. And in this instance, a boat would do 4 times around and then come to the finish. For those of you who are new to racing, and we've had these instances where there can be a bit of confusion about what way and when they round the mark. If you think of this as a piece of string, you can see it's always wrapping around the marks. So if a boat inadvertently went in between 1 and 1A, they would actually be required to go out, unwind themselves, and then go back. So that's where I say you think of this as a piece of string. I should mention too that clearly this is a buoys to port course. So the approach from the start line is into 1A, and you leave 1 and 1A to port, come down to 2, and leave it to port as you go back to 1. One of the unique things about QCYC in our harbor, actually it may not be unique, but as we have boats of various different sizes racing, we do sometimes shorten course for one division and not another. And we'll talk about how that's indicated in a second, but it does make for a finish line that is not as shown here. This is showing only the start. So the yellow tetrahedron would be the black dot. The committee boat would be this unique shape. And we will find that once the race is underway, at some point, our committee boat will move over and number 2 will become the finishing mark. And the finish line is between number 2 and the committee boat. The reason we do this is that we will shorten courses for some divisions, but not all. So we have a large group of boats, they're plus 35 feet in some instances that are running very fast. And at the other end of the fleet, we've got 24 and 22 and 23 foot boats. So if the wind begins to die, by doing this configuration, it allows us to shorten course for some divisions, but not all. Another common course, and there's some growing interest in moving back to triangles. This was a very common course several decades ago. People got into windward leewards, but there's a lot of interest in the triangle again. So in this instance, you will see that from the start, a boat will round 1, 2, 3, and if it had been 4, as per the last course board, 4 laps around and to the finish. And again, for this course, the finish, the committee boat will move over, so it will be adjacent perpendicular to mark number 3, and mark number 3 is the finish line. So this allows some boats to continue going around while others might be finishing. It's not great. It's a lot, puts an extra stress and work onto our race committee, but at this point in time, it is the safest way to manage different lap roundings for different divisions. The one course I haven't shown here is similar to this, except it's boys to starboard. So that is something that it's a possibility on Wednesday nights. The other course that we actually developed this. Some of the members got together we jokingly called it the COVID course. It's actually the Delta course in the sailing instructions. Because during COVID, we were limited to the number of people who could go on a committee boat. We were not able to anchor the Freddie M with a race committee. So they actually conducted the racing from the shore right near the club on the waterfront. We actually had members drop the starting line marks not far off the club, and another member would drop an orange cylinder in the corner, and we would round this airport mark. This is a keep out buoy that's at the western end of the harbor. It is the furthest most out. There are a couple of others here, but it's basically off York Street. So we were able to keep racing. We left it in there because there is that chance, for example, if the Freddie M is down, or if we don't have for whatever reason, we can't get a committee boat out, we have this in our back pocket, so to speak, where we can always pull this course together and keep racing. So a couple of things, again, going back to sort of my subjective best practices, I would say to new skippers that to a lot of us, or a lot of people, Wednesday night is important. It's easy to say it's not the America's Cup, but it is competition, and people want to do well, and there are lots of trophies. So I'd certainly recommend, not only for safety reasons, but just out of sportsmanship, that we all respect the fact that if you're new, by all means come out and race, but respect the fact that there are people out racing and doing so seriously. Our boat, we try to leave the dock about 45 minutes before the start. If you're new, you may want to get out sooner, but certainly 45 minutes gives us the chance to get out, get sails up, get organized, and do some practice sailing. It's important to check in with the race committee by sailing past the transom of the Freddie M on starboard before the start. So at the beginning of the season, hopefully lots of you will register to race, but they don't always know who is going out and who is racing. So it's important just to what we call check in, to go back past the stern in an orderly fashion when there's a space. Do it before racing starts, because otherwise you could get into a situation where you're fouling boats that are actually in their start sequence. But simply get out early, go past the transom, and call checking in. It is also the opportune time to note that course board. And I'm guilty of it too, where we started and went, uh-oh, did anybody look? Or is this course number 9? How many laps around is it? Et cetera, et cetera. By going out a bit early, it also gives you the chance to go sail upwind, practice a few tacks. It's certainly the chance, sailing that upwind leg is where there's a lot going on, a lot of wind shifts. So by sailing up windward a little bit once, and practicing, it gets your crew working and everybody thinking about the racing. I would encourage, and I have seen, and I'm certainly been guilty of it, where I sailed a little too far. And of course, going upwind is fast. Coming downwind is a lot slower. So you can easily become late or really get into a time crunch to get to the starting line if you go too far. The race committee monitors channel 69. So it's definitely worthwhile for you you simply should have your radio on. It's not the primary form of communication between a race committee and racers is actually the flags. And we'll talk a little bit about those, but just to assist, the technologies there today where a lot of people have VHFs, they have handheld VHFs, and just to make racing easier and more inviting, the race committee will use channel 69 to assist with start timing, to shorten course, etc. So it's definitely important to have that on. And as I say, though, if the VHF it's an option, but it's not. The common practice is to use flags to indicate course changes at start, who's starting when, etc. So it's important, as I mentioned, to monitor 69 throughout the race. And if you retire, you must radio the race committee. If you don't get a response, it's important that you then get to the race committee so that they are not, because they are recording boats that finish. If they don't have you recorded, they could be concerned that something unfortunate has happened to you. So it's really important that you either use your radio, or if there's an adjacent boat, and ask them to do it, but you really have to indicate to race committee if you've retired. So here are some important flags. Again, these are all in the rules of sailing, the racing rules, but you will see this yellow and black check flag. That is, means there's a notice. We usually put this up. This would be mounted on the Rapids Queen. So if there's something's changed, there's usually a notice board. It would be in the club inside, but it's a notice has been posted for change. If it's on the race committee, it's requiring you to come within hailing distance. And if it's a moving on the committee boat, it's a follow me. I've shown you the Freddie M, and I think everybody knows the boat, but it would be flying this race committee flag. If you're ever out racing in an open regatta, that is Canada's race committee flag. If you see the postponement, the red and white stripes, the Dr. Seuss, if that is flying off of the Freddie M or any race committee, it's indicating that the race is postponed. It doesn't mean you should leave the course. It might be, and in last summer, we actually flew this too often because we had issues with wind. So races would be postponed and that flag would fly. Last year too, we flew the blue and white checked because we did have to abandon a number of races simply because there was not enough wind. You will see these in the bottom, the individual recall. So there is a race officer who's monitoring the starting line. If you're over early, this blue and the white with the blue at cross will be flown, and they will endeavor through VHF. They will indicate and call the boats that are over, the boat that is over early. If everyone is over early, you will see this yellow and blue chevron. And finally, shortened course. So this is something to indicate. They do indicate by VHF what divisions will be shortened, and this flag would be flown. It can also be flown from the mark boat. So a common question is, when do I start? This is in the SIs, and it can look somewhat complicated, but it's quite simple, really, where as I mentioned, we have various classes. This may change. We may have 4, we may have 3. It depends on the number of boats out, but they are really grouped by that perf number. And that perf handicap number is really driven by the speed of the boat. So in that NFS 1, we have larger, faster boats, and they have ratings 160 and under. In Perf 2, this was last year, we had the group was between 161 and 185. So boats all with handicaps, if they were 162, 175, they would all be in Perf 2. Perf 3 was, in this instance, 186 to 210. So it could be a boat with 190 or 200, and they would race together. And Perf 4 was 211 and over. So these would be slower boats, not necessarily smaller, but slower boats. And each of these, when they start, this pennant is flown 1, 2, 3, or 4. We may or may not have backstay flags. We're looking into that now. But as things stood last year, we did not have them. And the Star has a class flag of its own. So this is under class flags in the sailing instructions. And we will endeavor to have those out as soon as possible. You can help us a lot by registering as fast as possible. So the sooner we know how many boats we have, that helps us get the sailing instructions together. But last year we had no flying sails. NFS stands for no flying sails. We do not fly spinnakers. FS is flying spinnaker, flying sails. We do not do that on Wednesday nights in the harbor. So everyone is NFS. And as I mentioned, the boats in NFS 1 would start first. We then combined the Sharks, which are considered Portsmouth, with NFS 2. And then NFS 3 and NFS 4 started together in the third start. So that's how you know what start is yours. These are the class flags. So they were, of course, when the Stars raced, this was the flag they were shown. It's their class flag. But these are number pennants, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so Division 1, their starting sequence, they would know when that flag was up. 2, 3, and 4. So just to run through the starting sequence, because again, this can be confusing for a lot of people. You should monitor, and the race committee will do countdowns, but sometimes there's a lot of action going on. Somebody may be speaking and miss the time sequence that's verbally given. We have a great race committee who's been really great at using the VHS to help us out, but it's important to watch these flags. I've used here as an example, there is approximately a minute between starts, just to give a bit of space. And then once the perf 1 and 2 are away, perf 3, which is combined with perf 4, they will see this flag. Last year, they would have also seen this number 4 pennant, but I'll just use the 1 flag for this instance. So at 5 minutes before the start, the class flag goes up. 1 minute later, the prep flag, the P flag goes up. So we now have the combined, the prep flag and the class flag flying, and it flies from 4 minutes to the start to 1 minute to the start. You now know when that prep flag comes down, there's a minute before your start, and that the start is when the number flag comes down. My experience is that the flags and the order of the flags indicating starts, etc., has been confusing for some people, and we don't want you confused. We want you racing. So this is the sequence, and this is where, again, crew members can be a big help on the skipper. The skipper is on the starting line. They're having to keep clear of boats. It's great to designate someone who identifies what flags are up. On our boat, we, of course, try to catch the 5 minute with it. We have a couple of stopwatches. If we miss it, we know we can get the 4. And so we work from that standpoint using watches to do the countdown. So again, mostly I'm speaking now to those who are new. I'm not trying to give tactics for, any of you, the more experienced racers. You already know this if you're coming in from another club or other fleets, but I think it's important you identify and know the other boats in your fleet. You can identify them by the perf ratings in the entry list, so you know who you should be racing with. I think if you're new, it's important to just, for the first few races, hang back, watch others. I know in my first year of racing, and as Mark echoed in his, we didn't even try to get the best start. We usually tried to get the 3rd or 4th best start, and that would be fine. So I think if you're new, don't go gunning in trying to be the best. You'll be a lot more comfortable if you hang back and gradually ramp up where you get more and more experience. For whatever reason, this is called barging. We have boats. The boat here is going upwind. They're close hauled, so they have right of way. And we've seen too many instances where boats say, "Oh, gee, I think I can fit in there," and they can't. But this is a common practice, I think, that a lot of new sailors judge. So I would encourage you to stay away from what's called barging. I guess there's a bit of an assumption that being that windward boat right at the committee boat is the best place to be. In many ways, it's true. You have the chance to tack away and again read. There are lots more books that are better than I am explaining at, but starting further down the line, especially if you're new, there's nothing wrong with that. It's better to get nice, clear air than a collision. During the upwind leg, again, mostly for new skippers, it's really easy to get into a groove and you start paying attention to how fast you're going. But if you're on port tack, it's important to look out for other boats on starboard. Especially if you're on a smaller boat and you're sitting on the weather side, it is important to keep a look down below you to make sure that there's no boat going through on starboard. Often we get a lot of interesting winds in the harbor. So one of the things that I think you'll quickly learn is who knows what they're doing and who doesn't. So it's great to watch some of the more experienced boats. Are they heading to the city? Are they heading to the island? There's lots to learn. As a rule of thumb, tack on the headers. So, if you're going upwind and you find yourself sailing, the direction mark is you're sailing further away. If you tack, of course, you'll be back up and sailing closer. So it's a good rule of thumb for starting out. We always like to find clear air and clean lanes. We found for our boat that really helps. And I think that, again, this is one of the things that the crew can really play an important part in. Whoever's driving and the skipper is probably paying close attention, or should be, to boat speed and sail trim, etc. So the crew sitting on the rail, especially if it's windy, can look for wind or common phrase is pressure, and look for dark spots on the water or ripples if it's very light air. Boats heeling, you can see, look up the harbor and you'll see some are heeling more than others, so you know there's a gust coming. So again, this is where the crew, rather than talking about the hockey game, can play an important role to assist in keeping the boat going and fast. When you're starting out especially, it's important to go through and to inform everyone of what's going on our boats. So it's not a shout, but it's certainly loud enough that everyone can hear. We call out ready to tack. So get everyone into position, gives them a chance, and then helms down, which is when we tack and when everybody's ready. The windward mark, again, there's lots you can read on this, and I would encourage you to do so. But of course, we have the ley line, which is as close as anyone can sail. Try not to find yourself over on a port tack going into a mark where you don't have any right of way. I think it's important too we try to think a couple of tacks ahead, what is going to happen and who's coming in and where would I like to position my boat so that I can have clear air. And then lots of communication. That's very important so that people aren't surprised when suddenly you're at the mark. We actually have either skipper or crew looking out and finding out, are we 3 boat lengths away or 10 boat lengths away? Downwind, again, if we were on the windward leeward course, we've now gone around the windward mark and we're coming back. I would really stress to new racers to pay attention to the downwind leg and the direction of the boat, because it's so easy if there's a wind shift or you're paying attention to other boats to sail what we call by the lee. And this is where you get the jibe that was unexpected. So suddenly the wind is not directly behind the sail, but off to one side and the boom flies across. It sounds elementary, but when you start racing, it's really easy to start looking at boats moving around and there are boats coming towards you. So you really can lose track of that. And of course, it can be somewhat dangerous if you have this accidental jibe. When you are going downwind, of course, you are a windward boat. So you must give right away to boats coming up from leeward who are going upwind. So you must give them right away unless they are on port and you're on starboard. And so we say, if you're passing somebody else, and I hope in your first year you are, the overtaking boat, you must keep clear. And dead downwind isn't always the fastest. Everybody thinks it is, but sometimes it's great to just sail off and jibe back. There's a lot, it's called velocity made good. It's certain there's the effect that makes this so, and I would encourage you to read a little bit about velocity made good. But the fact is that while these boats that are going out to jibing on a reach, actually they might go further, but they're traveling that much faster that it more than makes up for going dead downwind. A leeward rounding, again, it's important to talk about it. What's going to happen when you do tack? Are you going to just harden up or will you tack back? Just talk about it before it happens. Give your crew plenty of time to get the pull down. It may be at this point that you will hear a shortened course from the committee boat. So I think that's important to pay attention to. But again, just that communication on our boat we find is really key when we're coming into this leeward mark, because you're getting the pull down, possibly jibing sails to get over and going around a mark at the same time. And the finish, again, I reiterate that it's not necessarily obvious what the finish is because we move the committee boat, but you finish between the last mark and the committee boat. And the committee boat will endeavor to give a horn as boats cross, but it may not be exactly on your time. Once you do cross the line, I would encourage you to clear the line. There are other boats coming, so sail away and before you start taking down sails and putting equipment away and having a beverage. And finally, the après sail. It's a great time to learn, great time to socialize. At QCYC, we have a first across the line award. So if you are the first boat across the line in your division, the race committee reports it to the bar and you will be entitled to a pitcher of beer. So that's just concludes sort of the walking it through a race. I know it's very quick and high level because we've done it about 30 minutes, but there are a couple of things I'd like to talk about beyond that with respect to racing at QC. One is there's a great app called Race Cues. There's a lot online about it. There's a great YouTube that talks about it, but it basically uses a cell phone to track your race. So you can see here during this Wednesday night, a number of us had our race cues on. Mark and I are in this image. And so it actually tracks and shows us our speed over ground, our direction. It's a great tool. It's a great learning tool, and it can be a lot of fun to see what happened. You can record it. You should set it up about 10 minutes before this, or set it to start. I actually set mine, turn it on and preset the timer for about 10 minutes before our start, and I put it away. Don't keep your cell phone down below, because you could lose signal, and that will disrupt it'll actually end the recording. But if you keep it on deck, it will record your entire race for you. We have also a number of open regattas, but there are others throughout the summer. If you decide to get into racing, there are regattas at ABYC, Royal Canadian, PCYC, National. Everyone has an open regatta, and these are all marked on the calendar. They are generally course racing. So they'll have 3 races a day of a upwind, downwind leg. And then there are always great post-race parties. Etobicoke is renowned for a steak dinner, and Ashbridges Bay for music. So each one has its own character. The Blake Van Winkle was a trophy. He was actually a Commodore. There'll be more about this in the Clipper, the story of the man and the cup. But it was a big race. When I used to race, it was nearly 100 boats would go out. And so we are bringing it back. It is our offshore race trophy. But this year we're doing something unique, because we want to encourage more new boats out. And we are doing what's called a pursuit race. So in this instance, and this is a great kind of racing for people who are not comfortable on the starting line, or who have not raced before but want a taste of competition. So each boat, based on their rating, will be given a starting time. We'll start at 1 o'clock. And then, depending on the rating and the boat speed, each boat will have a start time. So in this instance, Zigzag would start at 1 o'clock if they are the highest rated boat. And then so on down. Ourselves, Bandolier, we would start 14 minutes and 50 seconds after 1 o'clock. So that it really is a pursuit. And whoever crosses the line first will be the winner, simply line honors. So if nobody catches Zigzag, this Abbott 22 could easily win the Blake Van Winkle trophy. Amen races are also a great way to get into racing. There are, I think, 5 or 6 of these. They are on the weekend. It is not as busy a race course in terms of up and down legs of only one nautical mile long. These tend to be longer races. I would encourage you to look at it, the amen.ca website. This was taken off of that website, but they will typically start from 3, go to 1, go to 4, go to 7, back to 3. So they're kind of longer legs, making it a middle distance course. It is free, and it's a great chance to practice with GPS, because you do enter these coordinates, which of course then you've got to find the next mark, which is not necessarily within sight. Frank Bush is a big advocate of Amen, and he is also our club delegate. So if you have any questions, you could contact Frank. Finally, this year, we're going to try some laser racing for anyone interested. It will be Mondays. It's going to be pretty friendly and informal. I think currently now we have about 6 boats, but if you're interested, there are about 240,000 lasers in the world. And so many of them are sitting in a cottage boathouse and haven't been used for years. You may know of one, but you can also find them on Kijiji. I think anyone who's raced dinghies will tell you sailing a laser is one of the best ways to learn an awful lot, as well as really enjoy probably one of the purest forms of sailing. So again, this is coming up Monday. We're pulling this together, but it will likely begin in mid to early June. So just a couple of final things. The sailing program does not operate without, like everything else in the club, without volunteers. I think, certainly the more I give, the more I get. So I would encourage everyone, if you want to get involved, if you want to find a boat to crew on, if you can't crew, go on the race committee. There's a lot to learn. Certainly we now use our skippers take turns, and the number who came back to me after we started this program last year and said, that was really a huge learning experience. It was just about 100%. I don't think there was any pushback on acting as race committee because everyone learned as race officer. So if you don't get on a boat, we are always looking and we can schedule you in to assist with race committee. The sailing program needs assistance to promote our regattas and racing. So it's always great if you have skills in promotions or social media. We are very fortunate to have a really crack race committee, and a number of race officers outside the club mentioned that when we ran races for Ashbridges Bay and Amen. But the Freddie M, it needs to be cleaned. We have a lot of awards. We're a 120 plus year old club. There are a lot of awards and trophies that need looking after. Graham chairs that committee, and I know he is in need of help with that. You can assist with sponsorship for the Open Regatta and the Women's Open Regatta. And anyone who wants to assist with the post-race socials, please contact me.